What's going on, everyone? DSP here, and today I wanted to take some time out to talk about a subject that's actually starting to become more and more controversial, and it's definitely related to fighting games. What I'm talking about is the fact that with the fighting games that Capcom has been coming out with recently, so we're talking the Street Fighter 4 series, we're talking Marvel vs. Capcom 3, it seems like there at least is a trend that roughly once a year Capcom has been releasing either a new version or a DLC that changes those games and their core gameplay. Now, originally this started with Street Fighter 4. Remember, there was Street Fighter 4, which is now called Vanilla Street Fighter 4 because it was the original game, back in 2009. And subsequently in 2010, roughly a year later, they released, it was a little bit over a year later actually, they released Super Street Fighter 4. Now, this was this was released as a retail release, as you can see. And what it did is that it added 10 new characters to the game. It added significant gameplay tweaks from the first version of Street Fighter 4, including changing a lot of things that players and fans alike had all requested. For example, Sagat was really viewed as the most overpowered character in Street Fighter 4 because he had really high damage combos that really weren't very risky to pull off, unlike some other characters. He was just really easy to play, and because of that, he was winning lots of tournaments worldwide. So Capcom listened and made Super Street Fighter 4 a little bit over a year later, but not only did they add these gameplay tweaks, they added a bunch of new characters, a bunch of new stages, some new game modes, and they re-released the game. Now, because Capcom knew this was basically Street Fighter 4 with new characters and gameplay tweaks, they charged $40 for this. It wasn't a full retail release of $60, they charged $40. Now, here it is a year later, and Capcom released yet another version of the game. Now, the real story behind what happened was that arcades, especially arcades in Japan, where video arcades are actually huge in Japan, that's the biggest place in the world where they are for popularity, and they have a very high concentration of them in Japan. They're actually a very profitable business there. They got mad at Capcom. They said, hey Capcom, you know, Street Fighter 4 you gave an arcade release and then a console release, but Super Street Fighter 4 was a console exclusive. And they said, this isn't fair to us. Now we have the old version of the game and no one's coming to arcades to play this game anymore. What are you going to do for us? So eventually Capcom developed Arcade Edition. And Arcade Edition added 4 more new characters and did even more gameplay tweaks to the game. Now, of course, when that happened, everyone complained that had this version of the game and said, well, now we have an outdated version of the game, we want Arcade Edition. And then so finally, Arcade Edition, just a couple of months ago, was released worldwide as a DLC for Super Street Fighter 4, or you could also buy it again as a standalone game. If you didn't already own Super Street Fighter 4, you could buy it as a separate disc, okay? Now, here's where the controversy starts to come in, okay? First of all, the fact that Arcade Edition is the second expansion, so to speak, or the second version, or the second change to the Street Fighter 4 gameplay. This time it only added 4 characters instead of 10, didn't add any new stages, didn't even add a challenge mode to anything, but it did add significant gameplay tweaks to the game. The problem being that a lot of the gameplay tweaks that were added seem to be very odd and not asked for by the competitive fighting game community. In fact, there's a large movement within the fighting game community saying that this game is actually a much better version than Arcade Edition for many reasons. One of the reasons is, in Arcade Edition, there are 2 characters who now have basically become the Sagat of this game. And now they are Yun and Fei Long. It seems like they've really been made to be extremely good characters. They gave these characters a lot of advantages, Fei Long in particular, that really improved him over his previous iterations in Super Street Fighter 4 and Vanilla Street Fighter 4, and he's a really good character. Now, this was all up for debate until Evolution this year, and at Evolution, come to find out of the top 32 people in that tournament, the top 32 placers, 21 of those players were either using Fei Long or Yun. Now that is indisputable proof that those characters are extremely good, or at least that they are top tier in that game, okay? Now, truth be told, did those characters win Evolution? No, they did not. But remember that Evolution is the absolute best in the world. It is the best tournament. You're going to have the best players from all over the world. So I'm not surprised that one of those characters didn't win, because you have the absolute best playing their best characters. If the thing is, though, the fact of the matter is, if you're not at a World Championship tournament, you're probably going to get dominated by Fei Long and Yun, because they're just that much better than the rest of the cast, okay? In addition to those changes that basically made Fei Long so powerful and added in Yun, a brand new character who's ridiculously powerful, a lot of the original characters from Super Street Fighter 4 have been nerfed, meaning they've been weakened. A lot of their abilities have been made worse. And a lot of people said, why? Was anyone complaining about certain characters like Ryu or, you know, these people that were nerfed in this game? And people are kind of scratching their heads saying, why were these changes made? And so, unlike when Super Street Fighter 4 came out and everyone said, this is a really good expansion, this is a really good addition to the Street Fighter 4 line, when Arcade Edition came out, a lot of people said, wow, this actually isn't as good, and I kind of wish we were still playing Super Street Fighter 4. Unfortunately, now all tournaments have adopted Arcade Edition, and we're stuck with this game, okay? Now, I'd like to move on and talk about Marvel vs. Capcom 3, because this right now is where the most controversy is happening, okay? Marvel vs. Capcom 3 took over a decade to come out, meaning Marvel 2 came out back in the year 2000. I believe in Japan it might even come out in 1999. I could be mistaken there. But it's been roughly a decade since the last Marvel game came out. And Marvel vs. Capcom 2, sure, it had its flaws. There was a lot of things that were overpowered in that game. But over the decade that that game was played, in the first 3 years, that game's dramatically changed. The gameplay, the mechanics, everyone learned that gaming engine inside and out. And so it became a completely different game 3 years later than when it was released, and then over the rest of the course of that decade, it became pretty much the #1 fighting game in the United States during that period of time. Until basically Street Fighter 4 came, and then the new hype came, and it kind of blew that game out of the water. So, Marvel 2, highly respected, a game that was never patched, never changed, and people loved it. Now you bring in Marvel 3. Marvel 3 was released in February of 2011, and so the game's only been out for, you know, March, April, May, June, July, August, 6 months now, and it was just played at Evolution. Well, all of a sudden, back at Comic-Con, which was just a couple weeks ago, in July, it was announced that there will be a new version of Marvel vs. Capcom 3 coming out, similar to when Super Street Fighter 4 came out, which was a little bit over a year after original Street Fighter 4 came out. And this new version is going to be called Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. It's going to add several new characters, I think it's more than 10 actually, new characters, a bunch of new stages, and significant gameplay tweaks. So again, Capcom seems to be following suit with what they've done with Super Street Fighter 4, and they're going to basically make Super Marvel 3, and they said, well, we can't call it Super Marvel 3, we have to call it Ultimate Marvel 3. So that's exactly what they did, which is kind of funny. But when is this being released, this Ultimate Marvel 3? It was announced it's being released in November of 2011. So do the math. That means that this game has only had 10, or maybe even a little bit shorter than 10 months to be played before the next version that replaces this game is going to be released by Capcom. Now, in Capcom's defense, just like they did with Super Street Fighter 4, they said they were going to release another disc version of this game. It's going to be disc only, just like this game was, and it's going to be $40, just like this game was. So they understand, you know, you shouldn't be buying the same game again. If it's going to have gameplay tweaks and just some new characters, it should be a little bit cheaper. So they're making it only $40, okay? But here's the thing. This game hasn't even had a year yet to develop in tournament play. It hasn't necessarily been completely fleshed out. A lot of people feel like this is really early. This game is in its infancy. And so now you're releasing another version of the game that's going to completely change it because you're adding all these new characters. And the gameplay tweaks that they're giving to this game, for example, they are going to significantly reduce how good Magneto is and Wolverine are, because a lot of people have complained that these characters are overpowered. They're some of the best characters in the game, and they're too good. And they really made them overpowered in this game. Those kind of changes, again, similar to nerfing Sagat in Super Street Fighter 4, make sense. But then, Capcom went on to announce, we're going to have a whole other slew of changes that we feel like throwing in there. So we're going to make it so that Hagar and Tronbon are worse. And everyone was kind of like scratching their head saying, who the fuck ever said that Hagar and Tronbon were overpowered? Nobody. No one was really complaining about these characters. And So it seems like what Capcom's doing is they're giving a couple gameplay tweaks here that people want, but now they're throwing in some other oddball stuff that no one seems to understand why they're doing it, and it's really confusing and upsetting for people who have been trying to learn this game in a competitive setting and go to tournaments and learn it, and now all of a sudden it seems like they're going to have so many gameplay changes, it's going to be like starting from square one to figure out what the hell has changed. Now, another line of controversy is coming out, and the reason is because this game, again, has only been played for 10 months. There are people, and maybe they're not the most competitive of gamers, okay? Maybe they're not looking to go to a tournament and place in a tournament, but back in February, they bought Marvel vs. Capcom 3 for $60. And here we are saying that in November, as of whatever that date is in November, and I think I have it written on my calendar, but I don't remember exactly what the date is, when Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3 comes out, this version of the game becomes completely obsolete. It won't be played in a tournament setting ever again, and it's not going to be played online anymore. You're going to see almost no one online playing this game. So if you don't choose to spend another $40 in November, you've basically just paid $60 for a 10-month beta of this game, and now, in November, you'll have the real game, but you have to pay another $40. So really, when you want to play the real Marvel vs. Capcom 3, you had to pay $100 to play it. Now that's not what I am saying, that's an argument that's going out there right now. A lot of people are very upset about this, and they're upset that this game is going to become a coaster come November. And I'm sure that when Super Street Fighter 4 came out last year, the same argument was said for original Street Fighter 4. Man, that game's now going to become a coaster because this one replaces it. So it seems to me now a common thing happening with Capcom that they're just going to keep re-releasing the same games with some gameplay tweaks, maybe a couple new characters, and charge you more money for it, completely making the older versions of the games obsolete. Now, I can see from a bunch of different perspectives on this issue, so I want to talk a little bit about it. First of all, I can see from a competitive perspective why this is annoying. Imagine if you really dedicated yourself hardcore to Marvel vs. Capcom 3 when it came out in February, because you wanted to be the best. You wanted to go to EVO and make top 32, and you wanted to whoop all your local competition, you wanted to travel to some of the local regional tournaments and do really well. You really like the game, you have a competitive nature, this is what you're all about. So imagine you dedicated countless hours to this game just to find out that now that you're finally really good at it, guess what? It's completely worthless. You wasted all your time because a new game is coming out in November that's going to change everything about this game, and you're going to have to relearn everything. So from that perspective, I can definitely understand why you would be frustrated. And from a casual gamer's perspective, do I really want to have to spend another $40 just to continue playing this game? What if you're satisfied with the game as it is? What if you and your friends, like playing this game, and you enjoy going online and playing the game, even though it is laggy, which I've talked about, but that's not what we're talking about today. we're not going to complain about the netcode. What if you just enjoy this game for what it is? Sure, you can still play it offline with your friends, but now you can't go to a tournament setting anymore. You can't watch tournament footage because you'll never see footage of this game again. It's going to be a game that you don't understand. You can't play it online because no one will be playing this game online anymore. It's not going to happen. So you really are screwed. If you're a fan of the original Marvel 3 and that you're really buying it just to have fun with it, come November you're screwed. It's over. You have to spend another $40 or you're done with Marvel. Then you have to move on to something else, okay? So I understand what's going on. Why that would be a complaint or a concern for people. So here's the thing, and here's what I really want to talk a little bit about. First I'm going to tell you the history of Capcom and what they've done previously, just to let you know this isn't anything new. This is what they've been done since day one. And but what's changed since they used to do it and what they do it now, and why it's a concern now for gamers. And then also I want to give you my own personal perspective. So, first of all, like I said, this is not new for Capcom. The original Street Fighter 2 had 5 versions. Within, I think it was a 4-year period, it had 5 different versions. You had Street Fighter 2 World Warrior, Street Fighter 2 Champion Edition, Street Fighter 2 Hyper Fighting, or Street Fighter 2 Turbo, which depending on where you went, they were called different things, Super Street Fighter 2, and then Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. So there were 5 different versions of the game. Now, from my personal perspective, I have to give Capcom a pass on just that one game, and here's why. At that point, Capcom really didn't know what they had when they released Street Fighter 2. They didn't understand it was going to become such a phenomena and that people were going to view this game as the first competitive fighting game ever created. And that's really what it became. It made people realize, wow, this game is so good, you can play this in a competitive setting. You can have a tournament for this game and it's just as good as any other sport. Now, keep in mind, the game had its flaws. There were a lot of characters that had overpowered things. There were glitches in the game, like a Guile handcuff glitch that would completely fuck stuff up, and you couldn't do that in a tournament. So they realized, gee, we should fix things, and then they came out with Champion Edition, which fixed a lot of those issues, plus added the ability to do mirror matches, because in the original Street Fighter 2, you couldn't each pick the same character. Every person on Player 1 and Player 2 side had to be 2 different characters. So they added the ability to do a mirror match in Champion Edition. And then people said, well, this game is really slow. We would like maybe a faster paced game. So then they created Street Fighter 2 Turbo, which added speed to the mix. Then people wanted new things. You know, there were different things that they always added to every single version of the game that significantly changed the gameplay of the game. All the way up to Super Turbo, where they added a super meter, so you have super moves for the very first time ever in a fighting game. You have advanced combos, and you also have the ability to tech out of throw, so you can actually do throw escapes in that game. Those things were original, completely original. Every iteration of Street Fighter 2 has something completely original added to it until they reached Super Turbo, and then they said, let's leave well enough alone. This game is good enough. And then they moved on to other lines. They tried to make the Street Fighter Alpha series, which was more of an anime feel, added things like chain combos. They moved on to Street Fighter 3, so they moved on to other things, okay? So I give them a pass on that because they were really trying to refine and hone the formula for the original competitive fighting game, and when they finally reached the perfect version, they said, we're good, okay? And then they stopped. But Capcom is infamous for doing this, for releasing new versions of their fighting games over and over and over within a short period of time. Take a look at Street Fighter 3. You had the original Street Fighter 3, you had Street Fighter 3 Second Impact, and you had Street Fighter 3 Third Strike, all within a 3-year period, and each version significantly changed the game, but yeah, it was technically the same game, and it was really frustrating for a lot of people to try to keep learning it, but not as much as today, and I'll explain why in a second. Capcom's also done this with the Darkstalkers series. Darkstalkers came out with 4 different versions of the game within, I think it was like a 3 or 4 year period, until finally they stopped releasing these versions. So, this is not new for Capcom to start with one game, the next year update it again, the next year update it again. This is what they always do with their fighting games. Now, some people would argue they do it because they want to get the best game, like they did with Street Fighter 2. Other people argue that at this point it's not about that anymore, that it's more about making money. That all they really care about right now is having a reason to hook you so that every year you're going to pay more money so that they can keep you as a customer and they keep being profitable. Now, here's the difference between the old days and now, okay? Before Street Fighter 4, remember, the last major game that Capcom had released was in like 2002. So, and a fighting game I'm talking about, and that was CVS 2, Capcom vs. SNK 2. Or that had even been 2001, shit. So, back then, everything was arcade-based, meaning, a new version of Third Strike, or a new version of Street Fighter 3 is out. Well, now the arcade owner has to go buy the new game board for several $1,000s and then make money, okay? Same thing with Darkstalkers and all that. It would always be the arcade owner who had to buy this new hardware to upgrade their game and get people to play. Now, here's the thing, okay? That actually helped arcades in a lot of the times, because what would happen is, you know, okay, Street Fighter 3 came out and people play it for a year. Alright, I played it for a year. It's starting to get a little stale now. Sure, you still have your competitive scene of maybe, 10% of the people who actually play the game, who love the game and are playing it hardcore and want to play it in a tournament setting. But what about the 90% of people that came because the game was new and fresh and hot? Well, what arcade owners were seeing happening was that the numbers of people coming in to play those games was going down as the games got older. And so Capcom will release the new version the next year, and all of a sudden, hey guys, Second Impact's out. It's the new hot thing. People would rush back to the arcades and start playing the games again, okay? So for them, back then, it worked. It actually made money for arcade owners because it found a way, even though they had to put more of an investment into the game to buy that updated game board, it would bring the gamers back into their arcade, and so they would make their money back and more significantly, okay? Today, it's a completely different situation. Today, you're asking that person, that consumer themselves to make that investment. You're not asking, Joe, who owns Joe's Arcade, to spend another $40. You're asking the guy who already shoveled out $60 from his pocket to buy the original game to spend another $40. And so it's a different kind of revenue stream. Back then, Capcom's customers were the arcade owners. Today, Capcom's customers are the actual people who are playing the games. So because you've changed the business model and where your revenue's coming from, that's why the situation is different. That's why this annoyance is coming up right now with the common gamer when it comes to Capcom constantly releasing release after release after release. And that also is the reason why you're getting so many complaints about these gameplay tweaks that are being made in a game like Ultimate Marvel 3. Back then, again, it was like, well, the new version's out, the arcade owner got it, we're going to play it. Now it's like, well, wait a minute. We're the consumer. We directly paid Capcom our money, so we have the right to vocally say, why are you making these dumb changes that we're not asking for? So right today, it's a big difference, a completely different situation than 10 or 15 years ago. It's more of an interactive community between the consumer and Capcom themselves. That middleman of the arcade has pretty much been cut out of the equation because, let's face it, anywhere besides Japan, video arcades are pretty much almost extinct when it comes to competitive fighting games, okay? So that's the situation. Capcom's always done it, but because time has changed and things have changed over time, it's a different customer and it's a different person being impacted by the fact that they're releasing a new release every single year. So, what are my thoughts on the subject? Well, here's my honest thought. Back in the day when I used to play Marvel 2 competitively, I'll admit it, when that game first came out, I was pissed. I said, wow, what are they, stupid? How did they not know that Cable's Air Hyper Viper Beam is overpowered? How did they not know that Storm is too good, or Magneto is too fast, and has infinite combos, and that Sentinel is way too good and does way too much damage? How did they not know this? And I got frustrated about it. But as time progressed, as I played the game over a series of years, and I went to countless tournaments, and I saw the strategies evolve, the game became a masterpiece. It really did. Because people found ways around it. People realized, okay, Cable's overpowered, but here's a way to beat him. You know, Magneto's fast, but here's a good way to use defense to outzone him and keep him out and make sure that he can't do his crazy infinites on you. So, the game progressed because it was given time to progress. Capcom didn't say, oh man, someone complained about a Viper Beam, let's patch the game. Okay? They didn't do that. So, the game had time to get better over time as people adapted to it. Now, I'm not saying that, you know, if you don't patch Marvel 3 that the game will eventually become to be like Marvel 2. No one knows. No one knows how good this game can eventually be if you give it enough time to evolve. That's the honest truth of it. The fact of the matter is, today versus when Marvel 2 was released back in the year 2000 are completely two different things. Today we have YouTube. We have the ability to show combo videos, to show tournament videos, strategies. We've got high-level tutorials up the yazoo. Any Joe Schmo can buy this game and within a week pretty much learn a character pretty well. Not saying that they're going to win a tournament with them, but can be pretty decent. Back then, it wasn't like that. Videos on the internet were few and far between. You had to go to your local arcade to learn stuff. So obviously the development of Marvel 2 was a lot slower gameplay-wise than something like this game. In fact, who knows? If this game, we didn't have YouTube and everything like we have now, would this game be anywhere near the level that it's being played right now in competitive tournaments? I have no idea, and it's just a hypothetical. We don't know. So maybe it's just an inevitability that with the technology as it changes and the times change, that the level of gameplay is going to change as well. Maybe right now we are where we were with Marvel 2, only within a 6-month period, because things are so different these days and the information is so freely available. And maybe now we do need an update for this because the game's just run itself into a wall. You know, maybe X Factor really did ruin the game. Who knows? But in my honest opinion, I miss the old days. And I'm sorry, I know I'm old. I'm 29 years old, and I was around back when Street Fighter 2 was competitive in arcades. I was there the day when the game launched in the United States. I played it as a little kid. And, I really miss the days when knowing I'm going to go play this game and I know what to expect. And if I invest a certain amount of time playing this game, I'm not necessarily going to be wasting my time because in 10 months the game's going to change again and everything will be ruined. Plus, there was a whole feeling of hype around these games. Oh, there's a new version of the game coming out? Cool. And everyone would rush to arcades to try to learn the changes and things like that. Today it seems like more of a hassle because it seems like, unlike back then, everyone's trying to be competitive. Everyone who plays these games and records a video and puts the match online is talking shit, and they're trying to act like they're the best in the world. And so it's a different atmosphere these days for these games. So it's really frustrating for someone like me who, I had the old golden days. I really did. I had the golden days of arcades. And now I see today, and it's a completely different situation. And I don't know. For me, I really don't like the current slew of fighting games for a lot of different reasons. I do think that actually this game sucks. I do. I admit it. That's my honest opinion. It's only my opinion, though. I think that this game has too many one-hit kills, meaning a character gets one hit in, does a 100% combo to you, and that's the end of the game. And it's like, what the hell? What kind of a game would have that? Now, they're saying that maybe Ultimate Marvel 3 will fix that. that's great if it does. I think the game will end up being a little bit more competitive. But I don't want to play Ultimate Marvel 3 for 6 months and then have another version of the game came out. I don't want to invest a significant amount of time and money into learning this game if all of a sudden the fucking thing's going to change and I have to totally relearn it again. You know, and maybe it's just because I have a competitive personality, because I've been competitive in fighting games before, and when I try to get good at a game, I'm serious about it. For a game to just be played casually, this game is amazing. This is a very fun game to sit on your couch with your friends and fuck around with, and it's really funny and shit talking back and forth. It's a good game, but for tournament play, it's just not that good. And again, I'm not the kind of person that every couple months wants to relearn a whole game because Capcom decided to patch it. And again, is Capcom really looking out for the best interests of the gamer, trying to find the perfect version of their game? Or are they just looking to make a quick buck every 8 months to a year to push out a new version of the game with a couple new changes, a couple new characters, and then you get more, you know, that's their revenue stream that you keep buying the new version. So that's the controversy going on right now. And I've seen people say from both sides of the argument, and I kind of agree with both sides of the arguments. A lot of people that say it's really exciting to know that Capcom's listening, that Capcom is making these changes, and they're trying to get the best version of the game. And it's also exciting because you get to relearn a new version of the game. There's something new to look forward to all the time. I can understand that because there was a long time between, you know, 2001 and 2009 when Capcom didn't release a fighting game. 8 years is a long time to wait for something new, and that's why so many people were so happy when Street Fighter 4 was released. But on the flip side of that, I don't know how I really feel. I really think this game, Super Street Fighter 4, was better than Arcade Edition. I don't think it was given enough time to be learned and played in a tournament setting. It only had a little over a year. I mean, this game, you could have played this for another 3 or 4 years probably and had no problems. You would have had even more higher level combat. People would have really fleshed out some of the characters that didn't get to shine, like Jury maybe, and you might have seen better gameplay. And I don't think they gave it enough time, and they kind of jumped the gun and released Arcade Edition to appease the arcade owners who were complaining that they didn't have that version of the game. So that's just my honest opinion. Right now, I'm kind of being very relaxed and reserved with what I do. I was very hyped when these games came out this year, and then as you saw, I really didn't get as hyped about them anymore. I didn't even really care about EVO this year because I don't really like Marvel 3. I think Arcade Edition isn't as good as Super Street Fighter 4. Mortal Kombat I won't even get into because it's become kind of broken since they discovered some things in the gameplay, and I'm hoping that they end up fixing them. If not, the game's still decent, but it's kind of still it's broken. It's a broken game in a competitive setting anyway. So right now I'm just kind of like biding my time and seeing what's going to happen. Will Ultimate Marvel 3 improve the game? We're actually now been promised by Ono. He made an announcement at EVO this year that there's going to be gameplay tweaks to Arcade Edition that will be a free DLC later this year that supposedly are going to fix things so that we won't have Fei Long and Yun being more powerful than the entire cast. Maybe the entire cast will be buffed again? I don't know. I don't know what he's going to do. But I just don't like the current generation of fighting games, and I can understand why people are complaining about new versions coming out every couple of months. From a financial perspective, from a time investment perspective, there's a lot of negatives about it. So that's the situation going on right now with Capcom fighting games. I'm interested to hear what everyone has to say about it, what your feelings are. I'm hoping to start a dialogue about this. So feel free to comment on the video. Feel free on my website, thekingofhate.com, if you want to start up a discussion about this in the fighting game section. I'd be more than happy to have that happen. But I just wanted to get my 2 cents out there and explain the situation to everyone of what's really going on, because I think it really is a very controversial subject right now. And a lot of people are on the fence. Gee, do I side with Capcom? Do I keep buying their games? Or do I kind of say, well, maybe it's not worth my time and money? What's the deal here with these constant new releases that they're coming out with? So, alright, so that's it. I just wanted to do a little bit of a coverage there of that whole issue. Hopefully when this issue develops, we'll talk a little bit about it more. But anyway, I'm DSP. Thanks a lot. Again, if you want to discuss this, leave a comment and we'll go from there. Thanks a lot.